on my final.
This computer. Okay, all right. I think it's recording. All right. Okay, so I hope it's recording. All right, so I'm in the textbook. I'm going to start in the textbook and basically sort of weave a story out of the chapters that are in the textbook. So the textbook opens up as every introductory psychology textbook opens up with a discussion as to what is psychology. Like, what is it? Psychology is the scientific study of behavior, the scientific study of behavior. Okay. Now, there's a couple of things to unpack in that definition, right? The first one is scientific, right? Scientific refers to of course, the use of the scientific method. Um, Whereas we make observations, develop theories to explain those observations, and then test those theories by generating hypotheses, which are predictions about what's going to happen. And then we run experiments to observe whether our hypotheses can be validated or not. So, psychology is in the family of science, in the family of the sciences. Um, some Sometimes people make a distinction between the quote hard sciences and soft sciences, and depending on what area of psychology you're in, you're in one or the other. The soft sciences are like economics and anthropology, and then the hard sciences are the real sciences, physics and chemistry and biology and those really the ones with a lot of math, right? The hard ones. Um, Psychology kind of bridges both. There's areas of psychology that are fairly hard science. So like the one I was in, for example, studying the brain, how mammalian brains process in motivational information and the way neurochemicals work. That's kind of the research I did. That was fairly hard sciency, right? Um, but nonetheless, psychology is a science. That's the first thing you need to understand is that psychology is a science. The word psyche comes from the ancient Greek, an ancient Greek goddess, Psyche, who apparently was more beautiful than Hera, Zeus's wife. So, of course, Hera got totes jelly and was really mean to Psyche. So, um, but and then of course, ology refers to the study of stuff, right? So there's all kinds of ologies out there. Um, One of the really interesting things I want you guys to understand, starting, there's a short discussion of this on page 7 of your textbook, but are the merits of an education in psychology. Uh, a lot of employers, particularly like big business and big government, huge, large organizations like corporations and whatnot, and even I mean, this applies to everywhere, but a lot of employers are looking for people who have already learned how to learn. Okay. In other words, it's not like back in the day, right, where you went to school for like mechanical engineering and then you got a job at Bob and Ray's Mechanical Engineering Corporation, right, where you started as a junior mechanical engineer and worked your way up to vice president of mechanical engineering, right, or whatever. And then at the end of your 45-year uh, of time at this company, got a retirement and a pension, and that was it. You spent your whole life doing nothing but mechanical engineering, and that's what you knew, and that's what you were trained in college, and that's what your job was about, and that's all you could talk about, and that was your thing, right? It's not like that anymore. You're going to get trained in something in college, and you're going to probably go out and look for a job in that something once you get out. Um, but I guarantee you, opportunities are going to present themselves, and you're going to end up, possibly doing different things, learning different things. Mainly because of the fact that the world is just changing so fast now. Things move at a much faster pace than they did even 20 years ago. Um, and so, what employers are looking for now are people that have a good set of skills related to emotional intelligence, related to learning how to learn, learning how to learn, related to a diverse set of skills, including reading, being able to read critically, being able to write, being able to do the basics of mathematics. That's what employers are looking for now, at least a lot of them. And in my biased opinion, of course, but in my very biased opinion, I think the psychology degree gives you a really, really good foundation to go be able to go out and get a job pretty much anywhere. I mean, you're going to find psychology graduates doing everything. I mean, absolutely everything, from engineering to being pilots to being, chefs, everything. So it's a good education to have because it's pretty well rounded. I think it prepares you fairly well for a any career, pretty much any career, with the proviso that you keep your eyes open and you learn how to learn. You're always learning how to learn, right? You're always having to learn something new. I can tell you, this is what's kept me employed, at a really, really high salary for a long time now, because I'm always, trying to learn the latest technology, the latest thing, and trying to, educate myself on that. I'm having to do it again, like right now. I mean, there's a bunch of new stuff that's out right now, and I'm educating myself on it. And trust me, it's a lot harder when you're old than when you're your age. And it's really easy when you're your age, but when you're approaching 60 like I am, it's a little tough. Um, so having said that, now what we're going to do is we're going to change gears here, and we're going to talk a little bit about the history of psychology. Now, the reason this is important is because what psychology is now, the way it looks now, is the result of its past. Okay. It's like you are the end result of your life experiences, right? Everything that your parents presented you with, and your friends, and and your teachers and everything. You're the sum total of whatever horrible experiences you had in life, right? Or wonderful experiences. Um, and so, psychology is the same way. A lot of people, when they're learning about the historical parts of psychology, they find it a little confusing. And the reason it's confusing is because there's a bunch of different themes all happening at the same time. And the way I want you to think about this is like the history of popular music. Okay, the history of popular music. Uh, you guys know that, even at your young age, that popular music's been around for a while now. I mean, ever since back in the day, Mozart and Beethoven were like the rock stars of their era, right? They were like the pop stars of their era. Um, but I mean, you could be listening to like one of these classic radio stations right now, or listening to some random mix of songs on a playlist somewhere on Spotify, and you can usually tell uh, what decade a particular song comes from, right? Just by the way it sounds, right? If you hear a lot of whiny voices and synthesizers, it's from the 80s, right? If you hear like that grungy sound, it's from the 90s. If you hear like a lot of guitars and pianos and tinny voices, it's from the 50s. If you hear like some orchestrations with guitars, it's like from the 60s. So you know where music comes from, right? Well, the history of psychology, just like music goes through all these phases, right? In the 50s, rock was invented, and in the 60s, we got soul music, and then in the 70s, it was funk, and then in the 80s, it was punk rock, and then and in the 90s, it was grunge. Just like music. The history of anything, including psychology, goes through these phases, right? Through these stages, and sometimes the stages are like at the same time, right? Like country music and rock music, right? They're at the same time. So we're going to cover all these different stages, right? The first one we start with, that we always start with, kind of like the original. He's the original OG, okay? The original OG, Wilhelm Wundt. Wilhelm in German it's Wilhelm Wundt, but it's the last name is Wundt. Wilhelm Wundt. Wilhelm Wundt was a German scientist, and he was the first person who really referred to himself as a psychologist in the scientific sense. He was the first person to call himself a psychologist. He is considered to be the first person who it was the father of modern experimental psychology. So he's basically the guy who invented all this, right? He was at the University of Leipzig, Leipzig, Leipzig. If you look on your map, you'll see that Leipzig is in the southeastern part of Germany. Back in the day, that was like Eastern Germany. You know, it was communist. So I think back then it was called Karl Marx University. And then after the Berlin Wall fell in 1991, they freed everybody and they renamed it back to the University of Leipzig. So it's because it's a very old, it's like a 400-year-old institution. But Wundt was over there, and basically what his mission was, what he tried to do was to create a scientific study of the mind. He wanted to create a scientific study of the mind. Now, you got to remember, he was the first guy, right, really to try to do this. And of course, sometimes the first guy doesn't get it right, like more often than not. And sure enough, he didn't get it right either, right? So here's what he tried, right? He tried to use something called introspection, INTRO spection, SPECTION. And what introspection is it's this technique that you train people on. So you get this person, you train them on how to introspect. And basically what introspection is you observe something in your environment, like, you know, like I'm looking at this bottle of medicine, right? I don't know if you can, there you go. You can't see it in my Chernobyl background there, but there you go. So I got this bottle of medicine, right? And if I focus on it, right, I want to focus on, you know, its color, the shape, the feel of it, the texture. And I'm going to have all these sensations going through my mind about this, you know, when I focus on this bottle of medicine. And if I'm one of Wilhelm Wundt's subjects in the study, I have been trained on how to interpret my sensations and write them down. Okay, so that's what he did. And his goal in doing that was to try to come up with the structure of the human mind. He was trying to figure out what parts of the mind were involved in processing something like a bottle of medicine, right? Or a pen, or, you know, a flower or whatever. He was trying to figure out what the parts of the mind were. Okay. It's kind of like if you were an alien who had never been to Earth before and you landed here and you see a car, right? You see this car just sitting there. Hey, what the fuck is this, right? So you get it, and then you start tearing it apart, right? You start tearing it apart just to try to understand what it does. And that's what Wundt was basically trying to do, is he was trying to understand how the mind works by, you know, looking to see how people were perceiving things and then deducing the different parts of the mind that might be involved in that, right? So that he started that. Wundt had a lot of students, PhD students, who went on to found other areas of psychology and found experimental psychology. So that's where experimental psychology got started, was in Germany. Uh, and his PhD students had PhD students, and those PhD students had PhD students, and you can trace their ancestry back, you know, the way you do like with your parents and great and grandparents and great grandparents, right? So all of us, most of us, I shouldn't say all of us, most of us that have PhDs trace our PhD lineage, you know, back to however far we can go, right? Mine actually goes directly to Wundt. I actually have my link is a straight shot up to or down, I guess, to Wilhelm Wundt. So that's kind of cool. So he's doing his thing in Germany, pumping out students, right? Meanwhile, he invented that. Meanwhile, a few years later, over here in America, we had a guy named William James. William James, okay? He was at Harvard. William James was at Harvard University. And to this day, you can go to Harvard University and you can go to the William James Hall, which is a giant 20-something story building on the edge of Harvard University, and you can go there. And if apparently if you're a Hispanic, you cannot enter the building, which I tried to do one time, and the guard was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And meanwhile, I saw all these white people just flowing in. So I was like, okay, I'm at Harvard, like the whitest school ever. So whatever, right? But I'll never forget that. That was very humiliating. But anyway, um, so at William, so William James, he came up with his own approach to studying the mind. Okay, instead of trying to figure out the structure of the mind, he was trying to figure out the functions of the mind. Okay, the function. What does it do? Okay, instead of what are the parts that it's made of, what does it do? Right. So if we take like a car, for example, right? Car is like tires, steering wheel, engine, transmission, you know, buttons, all that shit, right? That's a car, right? But what does it do? Right? It drives fast, it goes forwards, it goes backwards, it turns, right? It blinks, it has lights that flash, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So that's the difference between structure and function. So James was more concerned with the function of the mind. And he was very heavily influenced by Charles Darwin, who was very new back then. Darwin had just published his book Origin of the Species, which, by the way, if you have not read that, if you haven't read Darwin's original book Origin of Species, I would advise you to do that before you graduate from college. It's one of those big seminal works in Western history that I think every educated person should know. So I have my copy sitting right there on the shelf. So you should have one too. At least keep a copy on your shelf. That way you can impress people when they come to your house. Even if you haven't read it, you can impress them. Like, hey, I've read this. Right? I'm a really smart person. Um, but he was influenced by Charles Darwin. He was influenced by evolutionary theory, right? Evolutionary theory, according to Darwinian evolutionary theory, the traits that we have, right, our bodies and our behaviors have evolved over time because they are adaptive, right? The things that the way we look and the things we do and the functions that we do are all evolved over time because they helped us best to adapt to the environment and reproduce. Okay, so those of us that adapted to the environment the best got to get laid and make babies, and we passed on our genetic information to the next generation. And in that way, each generation got a little tiny bit better. And when you add this up over millions and millions and millions of years of evolution, you end up with this process where people can change, or I should say, species can evolve over time. So, so James believed, okay, well, the things that we do, the things that we think, that our behaviors must have evolved. They must have evolved over time, which of course they have. So he was trying to figure out the functions of our mind. Wundt was trying to figure out, and his students were trying to figure out the structure of our mind. And James had a lot of students too, of course. Then another guy, I mean, a few years later, Sigmund Freud. Now, most of you probably heard of Sigmund Freud, right? I hope so, anyway. Freud was an extremely influential guy for a lot of reasons. Um, One of Freud's biggest contributions to Western civilization was psychoanalytic theory. Psychoanalytic theory. Okay. And psychoanalytic theory came from Freud's observations of people that had supposed neurological problems. Sigmund Freud was what lived in Vienna, Austria, which back in the late 1800s and before World War One, when Freud did his thing, Vienna, Austria was one of the probably the best place in the world where you could go to college or go to medical school. I mean, it was like that was it. Back then it was in Germany. Germany and Austria had the best schools in the world. Today it's the U.S., right? U.S. and England. But back then, prior to World War One, it was Germany. Germany had the best universities in the world, and Freud was in Vienna and he was a neurologist. So he was a doctor. He was an MD, a doctor who treated people with nerve damage, neurological problems. Okay, well, he had these patients, mostly women, who would have things like paralysis, so they couldn't move their arm or they couldn't move their leg, or blindness, they couldn't see. And when Freud examined these women, there was nothing wrong with them. He couldn't find anything physically wrong with them. So he was stumped as to why they were, having these symptoms. But then he discovered by accident that if he started talking to these women and talking and talking and talking and talking and talking with them, eventually they would start to reveal past traumas that they experienced in their childhoods, like traumatic experiences that they had in their childhoods. And lo and behold, after they talked about those traumatic experiences and unloaded them, their symptoms would go away. They'd start to be able to move and see again. Now, this you have to remember, this was like a major freak out. I mean, because nobody predicted this. So Freud's like, oh my God, I have to explain this. So he came up with his psychoanalytic theory to explain this very, very strange finding that he came up with, that he discovered. And basically, psychoanalytic theory involves the role of your unconscious mind. So in psychoanalytic theory, we have an unconscious mind that's by definition it's unconscious, right? So we can't see it, we can't influence it, but it's there. It's there, and it's like the volcano underneath the ground surface, just a seething cauldron of impulses and desires, just under there, that are trying to force its way up. Freud theorized about the conscious and the unconscious and all these different parts of the mind and how they work together to form our personalities and to form the basis for some psychological disorders. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Now, a lot of people kind of crap all over Freud nowadays because he's not very scientific. The theories he came up with were they're a little whacked. We're going to learn about him later when we talk about Freudian theory. I mean, he's got things in there like penis envy, right? Which that's like my favorite thing to teach about penis envy, right? Because the jokes just write themselves when you're lecturing on penis envy. But but there's I mean Freudian theory is just very weird. It has penises and vaginas and poo poo and wee wee and just, it's just a very strange set of theories. Bottom line is that Freudian theory, psychoanalytic. Oh, there's a kitty! I see a kitty. Kitty. Psychoanalytic theory was extremely influential. Like, I cannot tell you how big psychoanalytic theory was. I mean, it was huge. It influenced the doing of psychiatry, the treatment of mental illness. It influenced psychiatry for the next 50 or 60 years. Anybody who wanted to be a psychiatrist back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s was trained on psychoanalytic theory. That's what you got trained on. So it was huge. It was a big thing. Freud was also a big deal in Western civilization for some of his postmodern ideas. As a matter of fact, guys, there is a why doesn't my mouse work? Well, okay. There's a show on Netflix. Let me see if I can find it. There's a show on Netflix that it's a series by a genius of the modern world. Yeah, here it is. Whoops. Let me stop that real quick. I hate when it plays and you just want to read the information, but it plays. Let me see. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Let me share my screen with you real quick. Share screen, desktop, share. Yeah, if you got some time and you want to, like, you want to blow some time, watch this show called Genius of the Modern World. It has several episodes. I think this one has 3 or 4 episodes. They're all really good, right? Yeah, there's Marx, Nietzsche, and Freud. At least watch the Freud one. But this historian, Bethany Hughes, who I've just had a crush on her forever because she's just gorgeous, I think. Uh, but anyway, she does a really good job talking about Freud, Sigmund Freud, about his influences and basically how he influenced the modern world. And there's another thing here called Freud, which is not quite as good. It's kind of like got some semi decent acting in it, but it's not bad. But I would definitely watch the Freud episode of Genius of the Modern World if you get a chance, right? Because it's pretty cool actually. It's a very well made show. It gives you just kind of it gives you like a 1 hour rundown of Sigmund Freud, which is always good, right? So let's see. So there's Freud, right? So we had Wundt doing his thing in Germany, right, and growing his students, and we had James doing his thing in the United States and developing his students and building his stuff, and then Freud, doing his thing in Austria and developing psychoanalysis. Um, some guys in, well, okay, so if you look at Freudian theory and you look at what Wundt came up with, and you look at what James came up with, right? And they have each one of those guys and their students talked about the mind, right? Now, can any of you show me your mind? Can you show me your mind? Yeah, yeah. Like, how much does it weigh? How big is it? You can't see the mind. Okay, you can't measure it directly. Like, I can't pull it out of my head or my ass or wherever my mind is and say, oh, here it is, right? Here's my mind. Look at that. It's so tiny, but all it thinks about is pornography. But it's my mind, right? I can't. That's all I've got, right? Um, you can't measure it. You can't see it. Is that scientific? You have to ask yourself that. Is that scientific? Because what is science based on? Science is based on observation, right? Science is based on direct, two people observing something and saying, "Yep, yeah, that happened," right? How, how can you do that with the mind? Okay, how can you do that with the mind? Bottom line is, it's really hard. Okay, now a bunch of guys came along. Of course, they were all white guys, right? A bunch of white guys came along, right? And they were known as the behaviorists. Behaviorist. So take the word behavior and put ist at the end of it. Behaviorists. Now the behaviorists were looking at Freud, and they were looking at Wundt and all his students and James and all his students, and they said, "Fuck no, no. What they're doing, what those clowns are doing, is not scientific. It's not, because they're speculating about things that you can't see inside of somebody's head. What is the one thing you can observe about somebody? Their behavior, right? Their behavior. You can observe their behavior. You can measure, right? I got my water bottle here, which I, like, literally 2 minutes before class, I dumped all over my computer, and so I was a little flustered when I. Here's my water bottle, right? You can measure how much water I drink in 5 minutes or an hour, right? You can measure how many words I say. You can measure how fast I can run. You can measure how much I sweat. You can measure how many times I press a button in response to a light. You can measure the sensitivity of my hearing and my smelling and my vision by my responses, right? By how I respond. So behavior is something that can be observed and measured. So these guys, the behaviorists, were were of the strong belief that the way to properly understand behavior scientifically was just to focus on behavior. In other words, on the inputs, on the stuff that we perceive, and the outputs, the behaviors that we do. Don't talk about the mind. Don't mention the mind. Don't think about the mind. Mind doesn't exist. Okay? Mind doesn't exist. So we had guys like John Watson. Watson was a very famous behaviorist who was at Yale University. who eventually, I believe he was actually, I think Watson was at Harvard, but Watson was a person who was very strongly a behaviorist and who very strongly believed that the way to scientifically study behavior was through just the observation of the behavior of animals and humans. B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner was an extremely influential person. He's somebody else whose books you should read. He actually wrote some novels and, and some philosophical works. But B.F. Skinner very strongly believed in using a very mechanical sort of approach to studying behavior. So he's the guy. Skinner is the guy. Let me show you a picture here. So Skinner is the guy who would actually, let's see, let me pop this guy up real quick. Where is, oh, there it is. All right, so let me share my screen here real quick. So if you look here, this is a picture of a box. It's called a Skinner box. And basically, if you guys can, let's see. Yeah, it's a little better there. So this is a Skinner box, right? You take a rat and put him in the Skinner box, and you can train this rat to do a bunch of different things in this box. You can train the rat, for example, to press that lever, this lever here. You can train the rat to press that lever to get food. You can train that rat to be afraid anytime one of these lights comes on by shocking him through this metal grid floor. You can train the rat to drink, well, I'm sorry. You can train the rat to press the lever at certain rates, fast or slow, depending on the reward they're getting. Basically, what this was an experimental setup that Skinner used to demonstrate his scientific approach to studying the inputs like the lights and the speakers and the foot shock, and the outputs, namely the lever pressing and the eating of food and drinking of water. It was like a little self-contained way to scientifically study learning behavior in rats. And he also put pigeons in here. He was very famous for putting pigeons in here as well. We'll talk more about Skinner when we talk about learning. Um, but again, Skinner, Watson, and then another guy, Ivan Pavlov, or the Russian pronunciation is Ivan Pavlov. Pavlov was a Russian physiologist. I don't know if you guys ever heard of, if you guys have ever heard of Pavlov's dogs. You ever heard of Pavlov's dogs? The dogs that drool when a bell rings. You ever heard of that? You ever heard that story before? Some of you have, some of you haven't. Um, but Ivan Pavlov was the guy who made this amazing discovery that he could train animals to do things like drool on command. And it was an amazing, it was a very earth-shattering, amazing discovery that he made, again, quite accidentally, like a lot of things in science happen. But this is Pavlov with his little whiskers, his little turn of the 20th century whiskers. He was actually a Nobel Prize winner before he made his big discovery in physiology, actually. But Pavlov, Watson, Skinner, these guys were all what we consider today as behaviorists, meaning that they were very much in this mechanistic sort of like understanding of how the mind works. Now, the problem with behaviorism is that it's not exactly right, which in science is not a good thing, right? Um, Now let me see. Lindsay Nielsen. I'm gonna. Oh, I got the big eyes there. She's like, oh my god. Now, Lindsay, I see that you're surrounded by animals.
Mm-hmm.
I see a dog and a cat.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other critters?
Yes, I have two dogs, two cats, and I think three fish and a hamster.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
but
so
back
you you're the expert. Okay, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. Is there any
Okay.
doubt in your mind? Is there any doubt in your mind that your animals have personalities and minds of their own. Is there any doubt in your mind whatsoever?
No, definitely. They each have their own mind. How they each
Absolutely.
act is completely different.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think most people that have ever loved a pet know this, right? I mean, I mean, like we have four cats, right? We have four cats, and each one of them has a very different personality,
Yeah.
and they plot little things in their minds, and it's just amazing, right? Now, here's the thing: the behaviorists did not want to talk about what was in a mind. They didn't believe that animals had minds. Okay, all they believed that animals were basically like these meat robots, right? Animals were basically just meat robots that were just responding to stimuli, things they heard and felt, and having responses to those stimuli, right? So as an example of that, right? Here's an example. The behaviorists were the people. Let me show you this picture here. Let me find a good one. Uh, oh, I had a good one here the other day, right? Oh, here we go. Maybe this one. Yeah, so here we go. Let me share my screen again real quick. So here's a picture of a maze, right? So the behaviorists were the guys who would like put rats in these mazes. So you put a rat here, right? Start. And then the rat was supposed to like go and explore this maze, find these like dead ends. But ultimately they were supposed to go here and find like the cheese or the food that was kept, right? So they would take a hungry rat who was kind of hungry, put him in this maze, and at first the rat's like exploring all over the place, right? And then he finds the food. The second time you put him in here, he's a little quicker, right? By the fourth or fifth time the rat goes in this maze, man, they're booking it to the food, right? Because they've already figured this shit out, right? They're like, and they go and they get the food, right? Now the behaviorists. Now you have to remember the behaviorists did not believe in a mind. They had to explain that behavior using nothing but the behaviors and the stimuli that the animal was getting. Okay. So what they thought was, okay, the rat is walking around and making these left turns and right turns. So his little paws are like hitting the ground, right? And he's making all these left turns and right turns. And what he's learning is the timing of the turn, right? So he's getting rewarded. He's getting the food reward at the end by making all the correct turns. So it takes him a while to learn all the correct turns and all the ways of putting his paws down to make his way to the food. Okay. That's a theory that doesn't require any sort of mind, right? You're just counting paw steps and turning left here at paw step 23 and turning right here at paw step 37, right? It doesn't require a mind. It just requires like these muscles that are like moving paws and counting steps. Now, how would you test that theory? If you're like anti-behaviorist and you're like, no, that's not. Hey, is that a beagle? Is that a beagle
Yes.
in? Oh, I love beagles. They're so cute. I like corgis better, but beagles are pretty awesome.
Corgis are way cuter. She's just fat and annoying.
So how would you test that theory? If you're a behaviorist, if you're anti-behaviorist, if you're an anti-behaviorist and you think animals have a mind, how would you test that? Well, let me tell you what somebody did, right? This guy was hilariously brilliant, right? What he did was he took this maze and he filled it with water. Okay, halfway with water. And then he put a little boat. And then he put a little boat here. And then he put Fluffy, the rat, on top of the boat. And then he pulled the boat through the maze with a string. And he just pulled the boat through the maze and took Fluffy to the very end of the maze where there was food. Okay? So he did this several times, right? He would take a hungry rat, pop him on this little boat, pull this little boat through this maze until he got to the food, right? And he did it several times. Now, the reason this is like testing behaviorism is because why? Well, Fluffy's not moving, right? Fluffy, the rat Fluffy is not moving. Fluffy's just sitting on this little boat, those little paws on the boat, and he's just floating down the. He's just. It's like being on the Riverwalk, those Riverwalk rides. You're just like cruising, and you get to the very, you get to the, to the, Palacio del Rio Hotel or whatever, and then you're done, right? Um, Now, the theory was this, that, or the hypothesis was this, that these rats that were put on this little boat, after, if you took the water back out and then put the rats here, they would have learned something by being floated through this maze on that little boat. And sure enough, when we float those rats down the raft 10 times, and then take the water out, put them here again, let them find the food, they find it a lot quicker than other rats that had never seen the boat or the maze before. Okay, what that demonstrates is that while those rats were floating in the boat, they weren't behaving, they weren't doing anything, but they were building a map of the maze in their head. They were building a map of the maze in their head. Therefore, they had some sort of mental model in their head, so they must have a mind. Okay, so it was experiments like this that kind of like started pushing behaviorism away, kind of making it less popular. Now we have something which we'll talk about a little bit later, but we have behaviorism has kind of gone by the wayside. There's still behaviorists out there, but they do very specialized things now. Meanwhile, here's another bunch of folks, right? So, Freudian theory. Let's talk about Freudian theory, Freudian psychoanalytic theory. Freudian psychoanalytic theory is very negative. Okay, it's very dark. Okay, it assumes that people are just pieces of shit, right? I mean, basically, Freudian theory just assumes that people are scum, and that we have to really work hard to like be not scummy. Okay,
Well,
that's
not wrong.
yeah. Well, in my pessimistic estimation of humanity, I tend to agree. But now, there were some people that said, "Oh hell no." No, people are not like that. People are basically good, and people want to be good. Okay, these people came to be known as a group in psychology as the humanists. Humanist, okay, the humanists. And their movement, their sort of little movement that they created in psychology was called humanism. Okay, humanism. Humanism was all about taking each person as an individual, understanding each person as an individual with their own thoughts, feelings, experiences, and putting the individual at the center of the world and trying to figure out what it is that each individual wants to get out of the world. So if you're a therapist and you're a humanist, right? Um, Humanistic therapists put a lot of attention on the individual. They would do they would have what's called client-centered therapy, right? Humanistic therapists are very, very patient. They're very understanding. So they're the therapists that are going to be like, "Oh, yes. Oh, I understand. Oh, that must have been so painful. Yes. No, no. What else? Yes. Oh, that must have been terrible." That's a humanist. Okay, just very loving and very very much, and I'm exaggerating a little bit but not much. Right, that's kind of the way they are, right? um, some of the humanists did put together theories of the mind, theories of motivation. One of the more famous ones that you're going to see a lot in your career in college is Abraham Maslow, Maslow, Abraham Maslow. Maslow came up with with his idea of this hierarchy of needs. Let me show it to you real quick. Let's see. Boink. Okay, so let me share my screen. Share the screen. There we go. All right. So here's Maslow's hierarchy. Now, when he first presented his ideas, he did not use this pyramid. This pyramid was something that somebody came up with later to kind of like make his ideas a little easier to understand. But Maslow himself did not use this pyramid. He never did. He never talked about it. But anyway, here it is. This is what you're going to see. Those of you that take marketing classes, those of you that take criminology classes, those of you that take sociology classes, you're going to see this. This is everywhere, okay? Because it's so it's such a it's such it's such a good theory that helps to explain a lot. So in Maslow's hierarchy, he talked about first at the very bottom the physiological needs, right? So first we have to meet our physiological needs. In other words, we have to have plenty of food, good food, clean water, a place to sleep, clothing, the basic fundamental stuff. If you don't have all that met, you're never going to get anywhere else. You're never going to rise above that, right? So this is one of the reasons why poverty is such a horrible, terrible problem, right? Because if you're living in poverty, well, you don't have a lot of these basic needs met, and you're never going to, become the person that you could possibly become, right? Once you have all these needs met, these physiological needs, the next level of needs are safety needs. These are needs for personal security, sound employment, access to resources, things of that nature. Once you have all that met, you have the love and belonging needs. This is the desire to love and to be loved, as Maslow said. Friendship, intimacy, being part of a group, sense of connection with something, right? Once you've established that, you have your need for esteem, okay? Most of you guys being like 19, 18, 19, 20 years old, most of you guys are right here. You're inside the love and belonging and the esteem, right? That's where you're at the moment, most of you. I hope so anyway. I hope none of you are down in safety, but God, I hope none of you are down there, or in the physiological. But most of you are like, you don't have a significant other yet, right? You haven't found the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with or whatever, and that's cool. You're looking, right? Single but loving it, right? And you're in college. You're in college because you want to have a better life, right? You know that you have to have a college degree to get a lot of jobs nowadays. It's a little check mark you have to have. So you want to move up in the world, so you know that a college degree can help you with that. So you're dealing with the esteem stuff as well, right? Once you've a lot of people stop here at esteem, right? But then Rogers had like the ultimate super high um, uh, level of achievement for a human being. That was self-actualization. And self-actualization is a very, very complicated topic. There have been a lot of people that have come up with a lot of different definitions for self-actualization. But basically, self-actualization is basically living your life fulfilling a particular purpose in your life, okay? Living your life to fulfill a mission or a purpose in your life. And, Maslow used to talk about this in terms of like really like superhumans, like, Jesus, MLK, you know, these people that we could never hope to, be like, right? But that's not quite the case. I think, anybody can be self-actualized if they've, sort of identified what it is that their mission in life is. But again, this was a response to like, centering on the person. In many ways, it was also a counter argument to Freudian theory. Okay, so that's the history up to the modern times. And then we have one more movement to talk about. That's the one that we're kind of in right now. Um, but does anybody have any questions or comments or observations about what we've covered so far?
I just had one, but it just slipped my mind. Oh, that's gonna bug me for the rest of the presentation. Oh.
How are your cats, Leslie? You doing all right? You have a cat on your. I see you have your cat on your chest.
He's fine. She's just sleepy.
What's his name?
Her name is Pissy because she used to pee everywhere. So
Pissy. That's awesome. Pissy. Oh, that's cool. I like that. That's cool. Well, what a cutie pie. I like her sideburns. She has nice sideburns.
right.
That's a cute cat. All right.
Wow,
So now we're kind of like in the modern age, right? So I mentioned behaviorism before, that behaviorism kind of went away, and what replaced it? Well, one of the things that replaced it was what we call cognitivism, or the cognitive revolution. Okay, the cognitive revolution. So think back to that experiment that I told you about with floating the rats down the raft in the maze, right? So we use that to demonstrate the fact that these rats probably have a mind, right? They probably have some sort of mind that they're using to build these maps of the world, of the maze. That leads itself into theories about what it is that animals and people do with those representations in their mind. And this is where we came up with cognitivism. Cognitivism is basically the view that humans and animals are information processing machines. Humans and animals are information processing machines. Okay. So what we try to understand as cognitive scientists are, what are the different parts of the information processing system in our heads, and what do those different parts do, right? So for example, later on when we talk about memory, the types of memory that we talk about are going to sound a lot like computer memory, RAM and hard drives and all these things. The cognitive revolution was very heavily influenced by the computer revolution, because they both kind of happened at the same time in the 60s and 70s, right? That's when computers kind of got big, and that's when the cognitive revolution got big. So a lot of theories now are very cognitivist. They're based on this, trying to figure out what the information processing that's going on in our heads are. Something else that has come up in the last few years is something called evolutionary psychology and neuroscience. Okay. So evolutionary psychology is the study of the evolutionary history of our behaviors. We do have a lot of evolutionarily we do have a lot of our behaviors, I should say, a lot of our behaviors are influenced by our evolutionary past, right? Certainly, certainly a lot of gender differences and whatnot are influenced by our biology and our evolutionary past. That's not the only thing, of course. Culture and language have a lot to do with influencing all of our behaviors. But our evolutionary background does play a role as well. Simple examples, right? Simple example. If you were to ask people, who do you consider attractive? Like, who do you consider sexually attractive, like to you, right? Most people, not all, right, but most people are usually going to answer somebody that is young and healthy, right? Young and healthy. That's typically what we consider attractive. And of course, there's exceptions, right? Humans are weird, right? You're going to have the guys that like the MILFs, and you're going to have the girls that like, old guys, right? Of course. But for the most part, most people find the most attractive members of their preferred gender, whatever it happens to be young and healthy, right? And that's that can be explained in evolutionary terms, right? If I want, in particular, if I'm a, if I want to mate with somebody and make children with them, obviously I'm going to pick somebody that's young, who's fertile, right? And I'm going to pick somebody that's good looking because that means they're healthy, right? And I don't want somebody that's old and full of disease and isn't going to be able to have any kids with me, right? I want somebody who's going to be young and healthy. Um, so evolutionary psychology, neuroscience. Neuroscience has grown huge in the last 20 years and has become a very important part of the world of scientific psychology. Neuroscience is a study of the brain and the nervous system, which we're going to talk about in chapter 2, I believe, or 3, chapter 3, I think. Um, let's see, what else? Another area of psychology nowadays, aside from cognitive psychology, neuroscience, evolutionary psychology, another big area of psychology is sensation and perception. Okay, how do we sense the world, and how do we perceive the world? What sensations do we perceive, and how do we process that information? Um, Cognitive psychology is another field that we'll talk about later. Cognitive psychology is the study of how we think and how we solve problems. How do we think and solve problems, right? So, what are the factors involved in us trying to, figure out how, what the best way is to solve a particular engineering problem, right? How does language play a role in all of that? Those are sorts of the things that cognitive psychologists understand. Another area of psychology around nowadays is called developmental psychology, which we will also talk about later. Developmental psychology. In developmental psychology, the people that are developmental psychologists, they spend their time studying behavior across the lifespan of a human being or an animal, all the way from conception all the way till death, right? And this is a big deal. I mean, I can tell you, as an old person, I can tell you my cognitive abilities are much different than they were when I was your age. When I was a young teaching as a young man in my 20s, I would teach statistics, for example, and I'd be like, doing problems on the board, and I could do them in my head. Like I could calculate means and standard deviations in my head, uh, no problem. Now, I can't do that anymore. I just it's just because I've just sort of lost that edge as a result of age, and that's one of the things that a developmental psychologist would study. Um, a big area in psychology, another big area in psychology, in scientific psychology, is personality psychology. Okay, you all know what a personality means, right? Personality means the particular sets of traits that an individual has. Well, where do those traits come from? Do you have the same traits all the time, or do you change traits based on the situation, right? Those are the sorts of things that personality psychologists study. A huge area of psychology now, a very, very important area of scientific psychology is social psychology. Okay. Social psychology is the study of how other people, whether they're really there, or implied or imagined, how other people influence our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Okay. Uh, so social psychology will study things, for example, such as, why is it good to be hot, right? Why do hot people, gorgeous hot people, have it so good in the world, right? Why do we treat gorgeous people so much better than we treat ugly people like me, right? It's like, it's like night and day, right? They also study things like group behavior. Why do certain decisions get made better in groups than others? Social psychology study things like racism, right? What are some of the cognitive bases of racism, right? So we'll talk about social psychology later, but needless to say, it's a huge, huge important area, mainly because of the fact, the reason social psychology has gotten so important in the last few years is because of social networking. Now we have, TikTok and Twitter and Facebook and all the other ways of connecting now. It's really brought out a lot of ways in which we are a very social species. Um, Finally, the last area of psychology, the last area of psychology is that I'll mention here out of the book is, of course, the one that you guys probably thought you were going to learn about in this class, clinical psychology. Okay, clinical psychology. Clinical psychology is the area of psychology that's concerned with treating mental disorders. Okay, treating mental disorders. So dealing with primarily things like depression and anxiety. Those are probably the two most common mental disorders in the world. There's 25 people in this class, I believe, or God, I can't remember how many I have in this class, but let's say there's 25 people. Statistically, probably 4 or 5 of you, even at your young age, have experienced depression or anxiety at least once in your lives. So it's a very common thing. It's very common, particularly among your age right now. And I'm sad to say that the number one killer of people your age nowadays is what? Do you guys have any idea what it is? The number one killer for people your age?
Drunk driving.
Nope.
Worth a shot.
Say again? Say again? What's the number one killer for folks y'all's age?
Suicide.
Suicide. Yeah, suicide, which is like unbelievably sad. Unbelievably sad. So it's a big deal. I mean, this is a big problem. Depression is a big problem. Depression is a serious disorder that you can die from. Literally, you can die from it. And we'll talk later at the end of the semester. In fact, is when we're going to talk about the clinical aspects. We're going to talk about mental disorders and how they get treated. Let's see. As far as careers go, as I said at the beginning of this lecture, psychology really is probably one of the best degrees you can get so that you can be prepared for almost anything. Most employers nowadays are looking for people who can do multiple things. They're looking for people who already know how to learn. So you have to be able to teach yourself new things. Okay, I guarantee you, the more you can teach yourself new things, the faster you're going to rise. The more the more you're, the better you're going to be employed, and the higher you'll go, the more money you'll earn. I'm a living example of that. I mean, I love to learn new things. I constantly love to learn new things, and it's served me really, really well. And I think my background in psychology has a lot to do with that. I'm a big proponent of it. Of course, I could be wrong. I mean, I could be totally fucked in the head, right? I don't know, but I'm just giving you this is my opinion, right? This literally is my opinion. It's not the professor, coming down and saying this is like, knowledge from from on top of the mountain, right? Like Moses coming down with the tablets, right? It's just my opinion about how good a degree in psychology prepares you for life and for jobs and for things. So,
Me smiling.
oh,
Me too. Smiling.
somebody's talking.
Okay.
Where's that coming from? Oh, now it went away. Okay. Anyway, does anybody have any questions or comments? Questions or comments? You guys have been very
this isn't the original question. That's still going to bug me. But
okay.
What's the difference between cognitive? Whatever you said for how we perceive the world, like in our own perception, versus just that humans are robots, like belief. Do those go hand in hand, or?
Oh yeah. That's more philosophy, right? That's much more of a philosophical issue, right? This notion of how much of us is like an automaton, right? Like a robotic automaton versus how much of us is guided by free will, right? Do we really have free will? That's a big question that's being asked right now in psychology and neuroscience and philosophy, is this role of free will, right? Do we actually have free will? and that's an extremely complicated topic. But yeah, those are valid. That's a valid research question that some people are looking into nowadays. The short answer is I don't know what the difference is because I don't think anybody does. That's what we're trying to figure out right now. Is to what role are we robots versus to what role are we agents of free will? That's the big question.
Oh, are
Anybody?
we ever gonna like meet in person?
I don't think so. Here's the deal. So if they ever, if for whatever reason, right? Oh, who asked that question, by the way? Oh, okay. That would be Adriana. Okay, Adriana. Yeah. So if they ever give the all clear, right? If they ever say, hey, okay, it's safe to go out and you can come to campus. I will. What I'll probably do. I'm still sort of trying to figure this out. But what I'll probably do is I'll go to campus and I'll just do my class from there. And from the Madla building, we have a room assigned to us. But I'll do it on my computer, right? So that if somebody wants to come and sit in on class, you're more than welcome to. But for the most part, I'll still do it on the computer in case people don't want to travel, right? Personally, I don't think we're going to ever meet face to face because of this. I don't think this pandemic's going to end anytime soon because we still got these fuckers out there who aren't wearing their masks, right? I mean, wear your mask and stay apart, right? That's the way to fight this thing. And no, there's some people out there not doing it, so we'll see. I mean, Adriana, literally, it's like day to day. I mean, every day everybody's trying to make a decision. So, we'll see. So. Did you? I get from asking that question. I'm guessing you'd like to meet face to face as opposed to doing it like this, right? Is that?
No, I was just curious because we had a room assigned, so I didn't know we were gonna meet this
we
week.
had a room assigned, but no, we're here. I hate teaching like this. It sucks. I mean, it's really hard. It's very hard to teach like this. But on the other hand, I like not having to drive an hour to go to go teach and then an hour to come back home. That's kind of nice, right? I like that, but I do kind of miss my car. But other than that, what are you gonna do?
Just do the Zoom in your car.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sure the cop would really like it.
Okay, kids, welcome to class.
Yeah. Yeah, that would not be good. Any other questions or comments? Let's see. Let's see. Ella Muskis is in bed, which is nice. Kathy Stetler, she's just chilling in her office chair. She's just kind of
Hey.
yeah. And Nancy Ramirez, La Nancy, there she is, just in her family's looks like you're in the living room maybe there or dining room or so. Is anybody not in San Antonio? Who's not in San Antonio? Is everybody?
Me.
Oh, Blaine, you're in. Can't remember.
Pleasanton.
Pleasanton, that's right. You're south of us. Yeah, you're way south of us.
Yeah, I'm like way south.
Yeah. Did you grow up in Pleasanton?
No, I spent about I would say, well, from a long distance perspective, a quarter of my life, but I did spend a pretty good chunk of my time here.
Okay, yeah. It's like me. I grew up in Uvalde and Crystal City. We moved to Uvalde when I was in third grade, and I got the fuck out of Uvalde as fast as I could. So I just wanted to get the hell out of there. So never went back. So my dad's still there, but anyway. So well, unless you have any other questions. Oh, Nancy, yeah, go ahead.
Will you be posting the Zoom like right after class?
It not right after class. It takes a while to render the video. The video takes like 20 minutes to render, and then what I have to do is I have to chop it down to make it smaller, and then I upload it into Blackboard. So it takes. It's not just uploading a file. It takes a little bit of effort. So I'll probably do it tomorrow.
Okay.
So yeah, I just turn on my computer and let it do its thing while I'm doing something else. But it does take a while. So
Okay.
I just did one for my social psychology class, and it took me probably an hour to get that stupid thing done, and it was only a 45-minute video. So it takes a little while. So. But I will get them up. I will post the video so you guys can relive the magic anytime you want to. So. Thank you for asking that, Nancy. All right.
I have a question.
Who's that? Abraham?
Yes. So I got here late because I just got out of my other class because my class is conflict. So
right.
Where can I find these Zooming meetings?
Where can you find what?
The recordings.
Oh, they're going to be in Blackboard.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, they're not there. There's nothing there now. But if you go to the content, if you click on the content area where I have my links and stuff, I'll put a folder there called I think I call it lectures, and I'll just pop them in there.
Okay, yeah, because I sent you an email and I don't think you've seen it. I sent you.
No,
I
saw it. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Guys, I'm really shitty about responding to email. I apologize, but
that's fine.
I'm just not good at it. So I will respond if it's like urgent and you're like clearly upset about something, but. Abraham, he was asking very nicely and just telling me stuff, and I figured, well, he'll come to class and I'll talk to him. So it's like,
yeah.
So
because my other class ended early, but it usually ends like exactly at the time this one ends. So I got lucky this time. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. And listen, apparently we got an email today from actually from like the dean, and he said that a lot of you guys are having problems with conflicting classes. So don't worry about it. That's why I'm recording and posting the videos. If you've got another class that happens now, I'm doing everything I can to make sure that you don't miss out on anything. So I'll have the videos online, and as long as you watch the videos and read my emails. By the way, with the emails, be sure to check your spam folders for your emails. I got bombarded this afternoon, or just right before this class, with emails from people. They're like, I don't know how to connect. You never sent anything. I'm like, I've sent like several emails to people. So, so please, check your spam filters. Make sure that you're getting the emails from Blackboard and from me, from my ray.lopez at tamusa.edu email address. So. Or rlopez1 at TAMUSA. it's both. So anyway, I think that's about it. You guys go have dinner. I have another fucking class to teach, so I can't eat for a while. So go have dinner, and I will see you
Thursday.
Yeah. Like, what day is it? Yeah, Thursday. So have a good one, guys. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye, Mr. Abraham. I mean, sorry, not Abraham.
Take care.
Bye, Blaine. Bye.
I would like to meet you, though, but, current issues.